You people always try to sneak into first class. The words cut through the pressurized cabin air like a blade, sharp and deliberate. Marcus Hamilton delivers them with the confidence of a man who believes he's protecting something sacred. He stands over seat 1A, his perfectly pressed Pinnacle Airlines uniform reflecting the overhead lights. His smile vanishing the moment he thinks no one important is watching. What Marcus doesn't know is that in exactly 22 minutes, those 6 words will destroy his career, expose his bias, and change the airline industry forever. He doesn't know that the woman he's trying to humiliate owns the cargo contracts that pay his salary. He doesn't know that Captain Daniel Rivera is watching from the galley, or that Elena Morales in seat 3C has already started recording. All Marcus knows is what he sees: a black woman in a hoodie sleeping in first class, and in his mind that's a problem that needs solving. But problems, as Marcus is about to learn, aren't always what they seem. Maya Thompson opens her eyes slowly, the kind of deliberate movement that comes from years of controlling rooms full of executives who underestimate her. At 36, she's built Velocity Logistics from a struggling courier service into a multi-billion-dollar freight empire. But right now, she doesn't look like a billionaire. She looks like a woman who hasn't slept in 72 hours. Her oversized gray cashmere hoodie is wrinkled from the airplane seat. Her black leggings are comfortable practical. Her worn sneakers have walked through cargo warehouses in 12 countries. Her hair is pulled back in a messy bun, secured with a rubber band she grabbed from her assistant's desk 3 days ago. The beaten leather backpack stuffed under the ottoman holds a laptop worth more than most cars, but Maya isn't trying to impress anyone. She's trying to get to London to close the merger that will reshape European shipping. She booked seat 1A on Pinnacle Airlines flight 847 because she needs privacy, silence, and 7 hours to review the final contracts. She fell asleep before the cabin finished boarding her noise-canceling headphones, blocking out the world. That was her first mistake, according to the unwritten rules of performing wealth. She didn't announce her presence. She simply existed. Marcus Hamilton surveys his domain with the satisfaction of a curator in an exclusive gallery. At 42, he's been a flight attendant for 18 years, the last 7 as senior cabin service director for Pinnacle's premium routes. He prides himself on maintaining standards, on keeping what he calls the harmony of the cabin experience. He's removed tech millionaires for wearing shorts. He's denied service to oil executives whose shoes weren't polished. Marcus believes he's the guardian of elegance, the protector of an exclusive atmosphere that justifies the $15,000 tickets. His blonde hair is gelled into perfect submission. His uniform is tailored just tight enough to show he takes care of himself. His smile is practiced warm for the right passengers, absent for the wrong ones. He carries a tablet that holds the passenger manifest, but Marcus rarely needs to check it. He can spot who belongs and who doesn't with a glance. Or so he thinks. Patricia Whitman embodies everything Marcus admires in a first-class passenger. At 58, she wears her wealth-like armor, a Chanel tweed jacket that costs more than most people's monthly salary diamonds, that catch the cabin lights, a handbag that required a 6-month waiting list. She's a platinum frequent flyer, the kind of passenger who mentions her status within the first 30 seconds of any interaction. Her husband Arthur follows 2 steps behind a man who has spent 30 years apologizing for her behavior with his tired eyes and slumped shoulders. Patricia stops at row 1 and examines her boarding pass seat 1B. She looks at the figure sleeping in 1A, and her expression hardens. She sees the sneakers. She sees the hoodie. She sees the dark skin of Maya's hand resting on the armrest. In Patricia's world, these details don't add up to a first-class passenger. They add up to a problem. Captain Daniel Rivera adjusts his uniform cap as he performs his pre-flight cabin inspection. At 45, he's flown for Pinnacle Airlines for 12 years, the last 4 as a senior captain on international routes. His military background shows in his posture, his attention to detail, his belief that leadership means taking responsibility for everything that happens under your command. Rivera earned his 4 stripes through skill integrity and a reputation for putting passenger safety above corporate politics. His dark eyes miss nothing as he walks through the cabin. He notices the tension before it erupts, reads body language like a flight manual. Rivera believes in protocol, but he also believes in treating people with dignity. These two principles usually align. Today, they're about to collide. The rain at JFK International Airport pounds against the reinforced glass of Terminal 5 like an angry fist demanding entry. It's 6:30 p.m. on a Thursday in November, the kind of weather that delays flights and frays nerves. Inside Pinnacle Airlines' premium boarding lounge, the atmosphere hums with the tension of important people in a hurry. Flight 847 to London Heathrow sits at Gate B7, a Boeing 777-300ER, configured with 32 first-class suites, 48 business-class pods, and 244 economy seats. The first-class cabin feels more like a private club than an airplane cream-colored leather-brushed aluminum accents ambient lighting that adjusts to the time of day. Each suite has a door that closes for privacy, a bed that folds flat, and enough personal space to conduct business or simply hide from the world. The air smells of expensive perfume layered over the airline's signature vanilla scent. Conversations happen in hushed tones, the kind of careful volume that acknowledges proximity while maintaining the illusion of privacy. Passengers settle into their suites with the practiced efficiency of people who fly first class regularly, arranging their devices and documents, requesting specific beverages, claiming their temporary territory. The cabin crew moves through this space with choreographed precision. They've been trained to anticipate needs to solve problems before they become complaints to maintain an atmosphere of effortless luxury. But beneath the polished surface, hierarchies and biases lurk like cracks in expensive marble. Maya boards Flight 847 during the priority boarding process, her Group 1 status earned through 40 flights in the past 12 months. She shows her boarding pass to Lisa Santos, the junior flight attendant stationed at the aircraft door, offers a tired smile, and makes her way to seat 1A. The cabin is still mostly empty, just a few early boarders claiming their space. She stows her backpack in the overhead compartment, declines the hot towel service with a polite wave, and settles into her seat. The leather is butter soft, the kind of luxury that usually comforts her after brutal business trips. But comfort isn't Maya's priority right now. Sleep is. She pulls her hoodie hood up over her eyes, adjusts her noise-canceling headphones, and lets exhaustion take over. The merger documents can wait until she's airborne. The phone calls can wait until she's rested. Right now, Maya Thompson, CEO of a billion-dollar company, just wants to disappear into her seat and find a few hours of peace. 20 minutes later, the first-class cabin begins to fill with the evening's passengers. Patricia Whitman boards with the authority of someone who considers airlines to be personal transportation services. She sweeps down the aisle, her heels clicking against the cabin floor, Arthur trailing behind with their carry-on bags. Patricia reaches row 1 and stops. She examines her boarding pass, then looks at the figure curled up in 1A. The hood obscures most of Maya's face, but Patricia can see enough: the casual clothes, the relaxed posture, the skin tone of the hand resting on the armrest. In Patricia's mind, these details create a narrative that doesn't include legitimate first-class travel. "Excuse me." Patricia's voice carries the kind of authority that comes from decades of being obeyed. "Excuse me, miss." Maya doesn't stir. The noise-canceling headphones are doing their job perfectly. Patricia tries again, louder this time. "Miss, you need to wake up." Still nothing. Patricia's jaw tightens. She reaches out and taps Maya's shoulder with a manicured fingernail, the kind of touch that's just aggressive enough to make a point. Maya opens one eye, then the other. She slides the headphones down around her neck and looks up at Patricia with the patience of someone who has been interrupted too many times in her life. "Yes, you're in the wrong seat, dear." Patricia's smile doesn't reach her eyes. "This is first class. I think you're looking for the back of the plane." Maya blinks slowly, processing not just the words, but the tone, the implication, the assumption wrapped in false concern. I'm in seat 1A, Maya says evenly. I have a ticket. I'm sure you do, sweetie, but sometimes there are mix-ups. This section requires a different level of preparation. Patricia gestures vaguely at Maya's outfit. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in economy, plus, it's still quite nice. Maya's expression doesn't change, but something shifts behind her eyes. She's heard this tone before, felt this particular brand of dismissal. The assumption that she doesn't belong delivered with a smile and wrapped in false kindness. I'm not moving, Maya says quietly. Patricia gasps a theatrical sound designed to draw attention. Arthur. Did you hear that? The attitude. Other passengers begin to notice the exchange. Elena Morales, a 29-year-old marketing director settling into seat 3C, looks up from her phone. Something about the interaction feels wrong, feels familiar. Elena has seen this dynamic before, lived it herself. She quietly opens her phone's camera app and begins recording. Just ignore it, Patricia. Arthur mumbles, sliding into seat 1B. She says she has a ticket. She does not have a ticket for this row. Patricia hisses loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. Look at her. People like that don't fly first class unless there's been some kind of error. The phrase hangs in the air like smoke. People like that. Maya removes her headphones completely and places them on the side table. When she speaks, her voice carries a new edge, the kind of quiet authority that comes from years of boardroom battles. Finish that sentence, Maya says. What exactly do you mean by people like that? Patricia's mouth opens and closes. Around the cabin, other passengers pretend to read their magazines while straining to hear every word. Elena's phone captures it all, the exchange already being uploaded to her Instagram story in real time. That's when Patricia presses the flight attendant call button. Not once, but 3 times in rapid succession, the electronic chime echoing through the cabin like an alarm. And that's when Marcus Hamilton makes the first decision that will destroy his career. Marcus Hamilton approaches row 1 with the smooth confidence of a man who believes he's about to solve a simple problem. He's handled situations like this before. Passengers in the wrong seats upgrade misunderstandings, the occasional glitch that puts someone where they don't belong. He prides himself on resolving these issues with minimal disruption to the cabin atmosphere. Good evening, Mrs. Whitman, he says, his professional smile firmly in place. I understand there's a concern about seating. Yes, Marcus, Patricia says, using his first name with the familiarity of a frequent flyer. This person claims to be in seat 1A, but obviously there's been some kind of mistake. She's been quite rude about it. Marcus looks down at Maya, taking in the hoodie, the casual clothes, the way she's settled into the premium seat like she belongs there. His internal algorithm processes the visual data: young black woman dressed casually sleeping in first class. The equation doesn't balance in his mind. Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your boarding pass, Marcus says. His tone is polite but firm, carrying the weight of airline authority. Maya looks up at him with tired eyes that have seen this script played out too many times. She reaches into her hoodie pocket and pulls out her phone, unlocking it with her thumbprint. Digital boarding pass, she says, holding up the screen. Maya Thompson, Flight 847, Seat 1A, Group 1 boarding. Marcus examines the screen, his brow furrowing slightly. The pass looks legitimate, but in his experience, anything digital can be manipulated. Screenshots can be doctored. Apps can glitch. He's seen people try to upgrade themselves by editing confirmation emails. I'm going to need to see a physical boarding pass or your ID to cross-reference with our manifest, Marcus says. We've had issues lately with fraudulent digital passes. This is a lie. Pinnacle Airlines hasn't had any unusual issues with boarding pass fraud, but Marcus needs a reason to justify his suspicion, a policy to hide behind. Maya's expression doesn't change, but she reaches into her backpack and pulls out her ID. "Maya Thompson," she says, handing over her driver's license. "Now check your manifest." Marcus glances at the ID, then at Maya, then back at the ID. The photo matches, but that doesn't resolve his internal conflict. The name doesn't ring any bells. She doesn't look like the kind of passenger who usually occupies seat 1A. There must be an explanation. "Ma'am, I need to verify this with our passenger database," Marcus says, holding on to her ID longer than necessary. "Premium cabin passengers are required to meet certain criteria." "What criteria?" Maya asks, her voice still calm, but with a sharpness that suggests she knows exactly where this is heading. "Well, Marcus fumbles, realizing he's stepping into dangerous territory. "Our first-class service is designed for experienced travelers, business executives, international passengers, people familiar with the premium experience." Elena Morales shifts in her seat, her phone still recording. This conversation is taking a turn that feels both predictable and horrifying. She opens Instagram Live and begins streaming, her follower count climbing as word spreads about what's happening on Pinnacle Airlines Flight 847. "I flew 43 times with Pinnacle last year," Maya says quietly. "I think I qualify as an experienced traveler." Patricia leans forward from seat 1B. "Marcus, surely you can see this is inappropriate. I shouldn't have to share a row with someone who clearly doesn't understand the standards we maintain here." That phrase, "standards we maintain," lands in the cabin like a stone in still water, creating ripples of discomfort that spread through the first-class section. James Parker, a 51-year-old business consultant in seat 2A, looks up from his laptop. He's watched this entire exchange with growing unease. Something about the interaction feels wrong, feels loaded with implications that have nothing to do with seating assignments. "Excuse me, James," says his voice carrying across the aisle. "Is there actually a problem with this passenger's ticket, because it sounds like she has valid documentation?" Marcus turns irritated by the intervention. "Sir, this doesn't concern you. I'm handling a seating discrepancy according to airline policy." "What policy?" James asks. "The policy that requires passengers to look a certain way." The question hangs in the air like an accusation. Marcus feels the weight of multiple gazes, the sense that this simple situation is spiraling beyond his control. He needs to reassert his authority to demonstrate that he's in charge of this cabin. "Ma'am," Marcus says, turning back to Maya with newfound determination. "I'm going to need you to gather your belongings and move to an available seat in the main cabin while I sort this out. We have a schedule to maintain." Maya looks up at him with eyes that have closed billion-dollar deals and stared down boardrooms full of skeptical investors. When she speaks, her voice carries a quiet power that makes everyone in the vicinity lean forward. No. The word is simple, final, unmovable. Marcus feels his face flush. In 18 years of flying, he's never had a passenger simply refuse a direct instruction. The other passengers are watching now, waiting to see how he handles this challenge to his authority. "Ma'am, if you don't comply, I'll have to call security." Maya settles deeper into her seat, pulling her hood back up. "Then call security. I'll wait right here." Marcus pulls out his phone and sends a text message to the gate agents. "Need security on board. Disruptive passenger refusing to comply with seating instructions." What Marcus doesn't know is that Maya has also sent a text message. Hers goes to her executive assistant in Manhattan code yellow. "Document everything." In exactly 18 minutes, both of those messages will seem like confessions. Marcus Hamilton stares at his tablet, the passenger manifest glowing on the screen like evidence he doesn't want to see. He scrolls through the first-class passenger list. Once, then twice, his finger moving with the desperation of someone hoping reality will change if he just looks hard enough. There it is. Thompson Maya, Seat 1A, Priority 1 status, corporate account. The information contradicts everything his instincts tell him about the woman in the hoodie. Priority 1 status is reserved for Pinnacle's most valuable customers, people who spend more than $100,000 annually on flights. Corporate accounts belong to major businesses, the kind that book entire cabins for executive travel. Marcus's thumb hovers over Maya's name on the screen. He could tap it, reveal the full passenger profile, see the booking details that would settle this once and for all. But admitting he was wrong now in front of Patricia Whitman and a cabin full of watching passengers would shatter his carefully maintained image as the arbiter of first-class standards. Instead, Marcus makes his second career-ending decision of the evening. He walks back to Maya's seat with his tablet closed to the passenger manifest, hidden like inconvenient evidence. "Ma'am, there seems to be a discrepancy in our seating process," Marcus announces loudly enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. "Your name doesn't appear on our premium cabin manifest. This is a lie delivered with the confidence of someone who has practiced justifying the unjustifiable." Maya's name is clearly listed in the manifest, but Marcus has learned that people rarely question airline employees who speak with authority. "That's impossible," Maya says, not moving from her seat. "I booked this ticket 3 hours ago. Check your process again. I've checked multiple times." Marcus continues building his false narrative. "Our process shows this seat as unoccupied. I'm going to need to verify your eligibility for premium cabin service." The word eligibility hangs in the air like a challenge. Several passengers shift uncomfortably in their seats. Elena Morales, still streaming live on Instagram, whispers into her phone. He's claiming she's not on the manifest. But how would she have gotten past the gate agents? Sofia Martinez, a 33-year-old emergency room physician in seat 2C, looks up from her medical journal. She's seen enough human behavior to recognize the signs of institutional bias dressed up as procedure. Sophia pulls out her phone and begins typing a detailed account of what she's witnessing, copying airline customer service, the FAA, and several civil rights organizations. Sir Sophia calls out to Marcus, her voice carrying the authority of someone who makes life and death decisions daily. "Could you please explain your verification process? Because this passenger obviously has valid documentation." Marcus turns toward Sophia, irritation flashing across his face. "Ma'am, this is an airline security matter. I need to ask you to remain in your seat and let me handle this situation." "Security matter," James Parker repeats from across the aisle. "What exactly is the security concern?" A passenger sitting in her assigned seat. The questions are multiplying faster than Marcus can deflect them. He feels the cabin dynamics shifting, the carefully maintained hierarchy that puts flight attendants in control beginning to crack under the weight of passenger skepticism. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus announces, raising his voice to address the entire first-class section. "I understand your concern, but federal regulations require me to verify passenger credentials when discrepancies arise. This is for everyone's safety and security." Another lie delivered with the practiced ease of someone who has learned that invoking federal regulations usually ends inconvenient conversations. Most passengers defer to airline authority, especially when security is mentioned. But Maya Thompson is not most passengers. What federal regulation requires you to question passengers who have already cleared TSA security and presented valid boarding passes at the gate? Maya asks, her voice carrying the precision of someone who has read those regulations. Marcus freezes. He doesn't know the specific federal regulations because he's making them up. His training covered customer service and emergency procedures, not the legal frameworks that govern airline operations. "Ma'am, I don't have time to recite aviation law," Marcus says, his tone becoming more aggressive. "I need you to cooperate with my instructions or face removal from this aircraft." Maya reaches into her backpack and pulls out her phone. With deliberate calm, she opens her contacts and scrolls to a name: Richard Morrison Sr., VP of Operations, Pinnacle Airlines. "Would you like me to call your operations vice president and discuss these federal regulations?" Maya asks, holding up the phone so Marcus can see the contact. "I have his personal number." Marcus stares at the phone screen, seeing a contact entry that no ordinary passenger should possess. Richard Morrison's personal number is known to fewer than 50 people outside Pinnacle's executive team. The fact that Maya has it suggests connections that contradict everything Marcus believes about who she is. But instead of reconsidering his position, Marcus doubles down, his ego fueled by Patricia's expectant stare, and the watching cabin won't let him acknowledge the growing evidence that he's made a terrible mistake. "Ma'am, anyone can create fake contacts on a phone," Marcus says dismissively. "I need to see actual verification of your eligibility for this cabin." Patricia Whitman has been watching this exchange with the satisfaction of someone seeing her worldview confirmed. In her mind, Marcus is doing exactly what he should do, maintaining standards, protecting the premium experience she's paid for keeping inappropriate people in their proper places. Finally, Patricia says loudly, her voice carrying across multiple rows, "Someone who understands what first-class service should be." She stands up from seat 1B and addresses the cabin like a seasoned performer claiming center stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption. I've been flying first class for 30 years, and I've never experienced this level of confusion about seating assignments." Patricia pauses, letting her words settle before delivering her next line with surgical precision. "I paid $12,000 for this seat because I expect a certain caliber of fellow passengers, people who understand the standards we maintain here." The phrase lands like a dog whistle in the cabin-coded language that everyone understands but no one can officially challenge. Patricia is talking about more than seating assignments. She's talking about who belongs and who doesn't, who deserves luxury and who should be excluded from it. "Some of us work very hard to afford this level of service," Patricia continues, her voice rising with performative indignation. "We shouldn't have to share our space with people who clearly don't appreciate or understand what premium travel means." Elena Morales, still streaming live, turns her camera toward Patricia. The Instagram live feed now has over 1,000 viewers' comments flooding in from people who recognize the familiar dynamics playing out at 35,000 feet. "Did she just say what I think she said?" Elena whispers to her phone. "The passenger in 1B is basically saying the woman in 1A doesn't deserve to be here." Charles Brennan, a 44-year-old corporate lawyer in seat 3A, initially nods along with Patricia's comments. In his experience, airline mix-ups happen frequently, and flight attendants usually handle them efficiently. But something about this situation feels different, feels personal rather than procedural. "Mrs. Whitman," Charles says carefully, "perhaps we should let the crew handle this quietly. The passenger seems to have valid documentation." Patricia turns toward Charles with the surprise of someone unaccustomed to being questioned. "Mr. Brennan, surely you can see this is about more than documentation. It's about maintaining the integrity of the premium cabin experience." "What exactly do you mean by integrity?" Maya asks from seat 1A, her voice cutting through Patricia's performance like a blade through silk. Patricia stops mid-gesture, caught off guard by the direct question. She had expected Maya to remain silent, to shrink under the weight of public scrutiny. Most people, when confronted with this kind of social pressure, either leave voluntarily or become defensive. Maya does neither. She simply waits for an answer. "Well," Patricia fumbles, certain standards, certain expectations about how people present themselves in premium environments." What standards? Maya presses. "The standard that says passengers should wear suits. The standard that says hoodies aren't allowed in first class. Help me understand which airline policy you're referencing." Patricia's mouth opens and closes like a fish gasping for air. She realizes she's been challenged to defend the indefensible, to articulate the bias that everyone recognizes, but no one is supposed to name directly. "It's not about specific policies," Patricia says finally. "It's about appropriateness. About fitting in with the caliber of passenger who typically flies first class." The word "fitting" hangs in the air like an admission of guilt. Maya smiles for the first time since the confrontation began, not a pleasant smile, but the kind of expression that appears when someone has just handed you exactly the evidence you need. Marcus Hamilton watches this exchange with growing desperation. The situation is spinning beyond his control, the cabin dynamics shifting in ways he doesn't understand. Patricia's comments are supposed to support his position, but instead they're highlighting uncomfortable truths about assumptions and bias that are better left unexamined. He needs to regain control to demonstrate his authority before the entire first-class cabin witnesses a complete breakdown of his power. Marcus makes his third career-ending decision. He chooses to escalate rather than de-escalate. Ma'am, Marcus says to Maya, his voice loud enough to command attention from the entire section. I've been patient with your resistance to standard verification procedures, but I run this cabin, and I'm responsible for ensuring the comfort and safety of all our premium passengers. He gestures broadly at the surrounding seats, inviting the other passengers to see themselves as victims of Maya's presence. You're clearly distressing our valued customers, Marcus continues. Mrs. Whitman has expressed legitimate concerns about the cabin environment. Other passengers are uncomfortable with the disruption you're causing. This is psychological manipulation disguised as passenger advocacy. Marcus is trying to isolate Maya by claiming she's the source of everyone else's discomfort, rather than acknowledging that the confrontation exists because of his own actions. Look around, Marcus says, spreading his arms wide. Does this seem like an environment where you belong? These passengers have paid for a premium experience. They expect to travel alongside people who understand and appreciate first-class service. The coded language is becoming less coded, more direct. Marcus is essentially arguing that Maya doesn't look like she belongs in first class, doesn't fit the visual profile of a premium passenger. Maya looks around the cabin, making eye contact with each passenger in turn. She sees Elena still recording Sophia taking notes, James looking uncomfortable but supportive, Charles wavering between social pressure and moral clarity, Patricia smirking with satisfaction. When Maya speaks, her voice carries the kind of quiet power that fills boardrooms and commands attention without volume. Mr. Hamilton, she says, reading his name tag deliberately. I've been flying first class for 8 years. I've accumulated over 500,000 miles on Pinnacle Airlines alone. I've never once had a flight attendant question my right to occupy the seat I purchased. She pauses, letting that information settle before continuing. So I'm curious what exactly is different about today. What has changed between this flight and the 43 other first-class flights I took on Pinnacle last year? The question hangs in the cabin air like an accusation everyone can see, but no one wants to acknowledge. Maya is forcing Marcus to confront the elephant in the room. The only thing different about today is that he's actually seeing her, actually processing her appearance, actually making judgments based on how she looks rather than who she is. Marcus feels sweat forming under his collar. The question is a trap, and he knows it. Any answer he gives will either contradict his previous statements or reveal the bias underlying his actions. Ma'am, this isn't about your flight history, Marcus says, his voice becoming desperate. This is about current verification requirements. Sometimes, our most frequent flyers have the most irregular booking patterns. Another lie improvised under pressure. Pinnacle doesn't have special verification requirements for frequent flyers. If anything, elite status passengers receive expedited service and reduced scrutiny. Irregular booking patterns. Maya repeats her tone, suggesting she's heard enough corporate doublespeak to recognize it. I booked this ticket through Pinnacle's corporate portal 3 hours ago, using the same process I use every week. What exactly is irregular about that? Marcus realizes he's painted himself into a corner. Every lie requires another lie to support it, and the web of deception is becoming too complex to maintain. He needs a way out that preserves his authority and justifies his behavior. That's when Marcus makes his fourth and final career-ending decision. He reaches for his radio and calls for backup. "This is cabin crew to operations," Marcus says into his handset, his voice carrying across the first-class section. "I need gate security on board immediately. I have a passenger refusing to comply with verification procedures and creating a disturbance in the premium cabin." The radio call galvanizes the cabin like an electric shock. The abstract concept of discrimination becomes concrete reality. Security forces are being summoned to remove a black woman from first class because a flight attendant doesn't believe she belongs there. Elena Morales stops whispering to her phone and addresses her Instagram Live audience directly. "Okay, this is happening. Pinnacle Airlines is calling security to remove a passenger who has valid documentation and has done nothing except exist in first class while black." Her follower count climbs past 2,000 as viewers share the stream across social media platforms. Comments flood in from people sharing similar experiences, offering legal advice demanding accountability. Sofia Martinez stands up from her seat, her medical training overriding her desire to remain uninvolved. "Excuse me," she calls to Marcus. "As a physician, I need to state for the record that this passenger shows no signs of distress intoxication or disruptive behavior. She's been calm and cooperative throughout this interaction." Marcus turns toward Sofia, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Ma'am, I need you to remain seated. This doesn't concern you. It concerns all of us," James Parker says, standing up to support Sofia. "We're all witnessing what appears to be discriminatory treatment of a paying passenger." Charles Brennan looks around the cabin, reading the room dynamics and making a calculation. As a lawyer, he recognizes the legal implications of what's happening. As a frequent flyer, he understands the power dynamics at play. As a human being, he's beginning to feel uncomfortable with his initial support for Marcus's actions. Perhaps Charles says carefully we could resolve this by simply checking the passenger manifest. If there's really a process error, it should be easy to verify. Marcus clutches his tablet tighter, the device that holds the evidence that would immediately resolve this situation in Maya's favor. But acknowledging the manifest now would require admitting that he lied, that he never actually checked it, that his actions were based on assumptions rather than facts. "The manifest check is part of our security protocol," Marcus says. "I'm following proper procedures." "What procedures?" Sofia asks, her voice carrying the precision of someone who understands protocols and follows them daily. "Could you cite the specific airline policy that allows you to detain a passenger with valid documentation?" Marcus realizes that the passengers are no longer deferring to his authority. They're asking questions he can't answer, demanding justifications he can't provide, challenging a power structure that depends on unexamined compliance. Patricia Whitman senses the shifting dynamics and doubles down on her support for Marcus. For heaven's sake, she announces to the cabin, "Why are we all pretending this is complicated? Some people try to sneak into first class all the time. The crew is just doing their job." "Sneak in," Maya repeats, her voice sharp with controlled anger. "I presented my boarding pass at the gate. I showed my ID at security. I walked onto this plane through the door marked premium boarding." "What part of that process constitutes sneaking?" Patricia's face flushes red. She hadn't intended to be so direct, hadn't meant to reveal the underlying assumptions quite so clearly. "Well, you have to admit," Patricia says, her voice becoming higher and more defensive, "you don't exactly look like our usual first-class passengers." The sentence lands in the cabin like a confession. Patricia has just articulated the bias that everyone suspected, but no one had stated directly. Maya is being challenged not because of any problem with her ticket or her behavior, but because of how she looks. Elena zooms in with her phone camera, capturing Patricia's flustered expression for her 3,000 viewers. "Did everyone hear that?" She just said the quiet part out loud. Lisa Santos, the junior flight attendant who checked Maya's boarding pass at the aircraft door, has been watching this confrontation with growing horror. At 26, she's been working for Pinnacle for 2 years, long enough to recognize when situations spiral beyond normal passenger service issues. Lisa approaches the front of the cabin with the kind of nervous energy that comes from wanting to help but lacking the authority to override a senior colleague. Marcus, Lisa says quietly, positioning herself between him and Maya's seat. "Could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Marcus turns toward Lisa with the irritation of someone whose authority is being questioned by a subordinate. "Lisa, I'm handling this situation. Please return to your station." "I know, but I processed this passenger's boarding at the door." Lisa says, her voice low but urgent. Her documentation was perfect. Priority 1. Status corporate account. Everything checked out. Lisa is trying to provide Marcus with a face-saving way to end the confrontation. She's offering him information that would justify backing down while preserving some dignity. But Marcus is too invested in his narrative to accept the lifeline. "Lisa, boarding documentation can be falsified," Marcus says loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "That's why we have additional verification procedures for premium cabin access." "But," Marcus, Lisa presses, "I ran her name through the process." Maya Thompson is a legitimate Priority 1 passenger. She's flown with us dozens of times. Marcus feels a moment of doubt as Lisa's words contradict everything he's assumed about Maya. But admitting error now in front of Patricia and the entire first-class cabin would be tantamount to professional suicide. He's committed to this course of action and retreat seems impossible. "Lisa, I appreciate your concern, but I have more experience with these situations," Marcus says with forced authority. "Sometimes passengers build false histories to support fraudulent travel. I've seen it before." This is another lie, but Marcus delivers it with conviction. He's creating a narrative where his skepticism is justified, where his experience trumps Lisa's documentation, where his gut instinct matters more than actual evidence. Lisa looks around the cabin, seeing the passengers watching this exchange with growing discomfort. She recognizes that this situation is about to become much worse, and she makes one last attempt at intervention. "Marcus, maybe we should call the captain," Lisa suggests. "Let him make the final decision about passenger removal." The suggestion hangs in the air like a challenge. In airline hierarchy, captains have ultimate authority over passenger issues. If Marcus truly believes Maya poses a security risk or documentation problem involving the captain would be the appropriate escalation. But Marcus knows that Captain Rivera would check the passenger manifest immediately, would see Maya's legitimate Priority 1 status, would ask uncomfortable questions about why this confrontation began in the first place. "The captain is busy with pre-flight procedures," Marcus says, dismissing Lisa's suggestion. "This is a cabin service issue which falls under my jurisdiction." Lisa realizes that Marcus isn't going to back down, that he's committed to this path regardless of evidence or consequences. She looks at Maya with sympathy and retreats to the galley, pulling out her phone to text a message to the chief purser. "Need help in first class." Marcus is removing a legitimate passenger. The first-class cabin falls into tense silence as everyone waits for security to arrive. Maya remains seated, her posture relaxed but alert, like someone who has been in difficult negotiations before and knows that patience is a weapon. Marcus stands near row 1, his tablet still clutched in his hand. The passenger manifest still unexamined. He's crossed a line from which retreat seems impossible, committed to a narrative that requires Maya to be wrong even as evidence mounts that she's exactly who she claims to be. Patricia sits in 1B with satisfaction, convinced that she's witnessing justice being served. In her worldview, Marcus is protecting the premium cabin experience from people who don't deserve it, maintaining standards that justify the high prices she pays. Elena continues streaming, her audience growing as the story spreads across social media. The Instagram live chat fills with comments from viewers sharing similar experiences, offering legal advice, demanding accountability from Pinnacle Airlines. Sophia and James exchange glances across the aisle, both recognizing that they're witnessing something that will have consequences far beyond this flight. The atmosphere in the cabin has shifted from luxury travel to civil rights confrontation. Charles Brennan checks his watch, calculating how much time has passed since boarding began. As a lawyer, he understands that every minute of this confrontation is being documented, creating evidence that could be used in discrimination lawsuits, federal complaints, and civil rights investigations. Maya checks her phone and sees a text from her executive assistant legal team standing by. Crisis management team activated. Ready for phase 2 on your signal. She types back a single word. Wait. In exactly 12 minutes, Maya will give the signal that changes everything. But first, she needs to let this situation play out completely, to give everyone involved enough rope to reveal their true characters. The footsteps approaching from the jet bridge sound like a countdown to reckoning. 2 airport security officers step onto Flight 847, their presence immediately shifting the cabin atmosphere from tense disagreement to potential criminal investigation. Officer Rodriguez, a 38-year-old security veteran with kind eyes and careful movements, enters first. Officer Thompson, younger at 31 with the eager intensity of someone still proving himself, follows close behind. Marcus Hamilton straightens his uniform and approaches them with the confidence of someone who believes backup has arrived. In his mind, security will quickly assess the situation, recognize his authority, and remove the disruptive passenger so the flight can proceed on schedule. "Officers, thank you for responding so quickly," Marcus says, his voice carrying the relief of someone who thinks reinforcements will validate his position. "We have a passenger in seat 1A who refuses to provide proper verification for premium cabin access. She's been combative and disruptive despite multiple attempts at de-escalation." Officer Rodriguez looks past Marcus toward Maya, who remains seated calmly in her first-class suite. She hasn't moved since the confrontation began, hasn't raised her voice, hasn't displayed any behavior that matches Marcus's description of disruption. "Ma'am," Officer Rodriguez says to Maya, his tone professional but respectful, "could you please tell me your name and show me your identification?" Maya reaches into her backpack and produces her driver's license and boarding pass, handing them to Officer Rodriguez with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to verification procedures. "Maya Thompson," she says evenly. Seat 1A, priority. 1 passenger corporate account. Officer Rodriguez examines the documents, noting that everything appears legitimate and properly validated. The photo matches the boarding pass, shows correct flight and seat information, and the passenger exhibits none of the agitation or intoxication typically associated with disruptive behavior calls. "Mr. Hamilton," Officer Rodriguez says, turning back to Marcus, "could you explain the specific issue with this passenger's documentation?" Everything appears to be in order. Marcus feels a moment of panic as he realizes the security officers aren't automatically taking his side. They're asking questions, examining evidence, treating this as an investigation rather than a simple passenger removal. "Well, officers, we've had issues with falsified digital boarding passes," Marcus improvises. "This passenger's behavior and appearance raised red flags that required additional verification." Officer Thompson looks around the first-class cabin, noting the expensive seats, the well-dressed passengers, the atmosphere of luxury that Marcus claims to be protecting. "What specific behavior concerned you?" Officer Thompson asks. "Because from what I can see, the passenger is sitting quietly in her assigned seat." Patricia Whitman rises from seat 1B, sensing that Marcus needs support from the passenger he's supposedly defending. "Officers, I requested the crew's assistance because this person clearly doesn't belong in first class," Patricia announces with the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "Look at how she's dressed. Look at her attitude. I've been flying premium cabins for decades, and I know inappropriate passengers when I see them." The words hang in the cabin air like a toxic cloud. Patricia has just provided the security officers with explicit evidence of the real motivation behind this confrontation bias based on appearance and assumptions about who deserves luxury. Officer Rodriguez exchanges a glance with Officer Thompson. They've both seen this dynamic before: passengers and crew members using airline authority to enforce social hierarchies that have nothing to do with legitimate security concerns. Elena Morales, still streaming live to nearly 4,000 viewers, whispers into her phone. The passenger in 1B just told security that the woman in 1A doesn't belong here because of how she looks. This is discrimination happening in real time. Captain Daniel Rivera finishes his pre-flight checks and notices the unusual delay in boarding completion. According to his schedule, first-class passengers should have been settled and cabin doors should be approaching closure. The extended timeline suggests a problem that might affect departure. Rivera unbuckles from his captain's seat and makes his way through the business-class cabin toward the first-class section. As lead pilot, he has ultimate authority over all passenger-related decisions, including removal of disruptive individuals. But he also has responsibility for ensuring that airline policies are followed correctly and that passengers are treated with dignity. As Rivera approaches the first-class cabin, he hears raised voices and sees the distinctive uniforms of airport security personnel. This immediately elevates his concern. Security calls usually involve serious safety or legal issues that require captain-level oversight. Rivera positions himself at the galley entrance, where he can observe the situation without immediately inserting himself into the confrontation. His military training taught him to assess before acting, to understand dynamics, before making decisions that affect multiple people. From his vantage point, Rivera can see Maya seated calmly in 1A security officers, examining documentation, Marcus gesticulating with nervous energy, and Patricia standing beside her seat in an agitated state. The body language tells a story that doesn't match a typical security concern. Rivera notices Elena's phone recording, recognizes the live streaming setup that could turn any mishandled situation into a viral nightmare for Pinnacle Airlines. As captain, he's responsible not just for flight safety, but for protecting the airline's reputation and ensuring compliance with federal anti-discrimination regulations. Something about this scene triggers Rivera's internal warning devices. In 12 years of flying commercial aviation, he's learned to recognize the difference between legitimate security concerns and bias-motivated confrontations disguised as policy enforcement. Rivera pulls out his phone and opens the Pinnacle Airlines crew app, accessing the passenger manifest for Flight 847. He scrolls to the first-class section and finds Seat 1A Thompson Maya. Priority 1 status. Corporate account. Frequent flyer with exemplary travel history. The manifest information contradicts everything he's observing about this confrontation. If Maya Thompson is a Priority 1 passenger with corporate account status, why are security officers examining her documentation? Why is Marcus treating her like a potential fraud case? Rivera's suspicion crystallizes into certainty. This isn't a security issue. This is a discrimination problem that's about to become a legal nightmare for everyone involved. Maya reaches into her backpack and retrieves a slim leather card holder, the kind of accessory that announces importance without ostentation. She opens it deliberately, letting the cabin observe her movements, and removes a business card. The card is heavy stock matte black with raised silver lettering. Maya Thompson, Chief Executive Officer, Velocity Logistics. Below her name, smaller text lists credentials that would make any airline executive take notice. Global transportation leader, $2.8 billion annual revenue, Fortune 500 CEO. Maya places the card on the armrest of Seat 1A, where everyone can see it, but she doesn't make any grand announcements or demands for recognition. She simply lets the evidence speak for itself. Marcus glances at the card and feels his first real moment of doubt. CEO credentials can be faked, but the quality of the printing, the professional design, the specific details all suggest authenticity. More importantly, the calm confidence with which Maya presents the card indicates someone accustomed to being taken seriously in business environments. Anyone can have business cards printed, Marcus says, but his voice lacks the conviction he displayed earlier. We've seen people create fake credentials to gain access to premium services. Officer Rodriguez picks up the business card and examines it carefully. As a security professional, he's trained to recognize the difference between authentic corporate materials and obvious forgeries. This card exhibits all the markers of legitimate business credentials. Ma'am, Officer Rodriguez says to Maya, "Could you provide any additional verification of your identity or business affiliation?" Maya unlocks her phone and opens her email application, showing Officer Rodriguez her inbox. The screen displays dozens of messages with subject lines that immediately capture attention. European Merger Final Terms Board Meeting, Q4 Results, Regulatory Approval, Amsterdam Terminal. These aren't the emails of someone pretending to be a CEO. They're the communications of someone actively running a major corporation, dealing with transactions worth hundreds of millions of dollars. "This is my corporate email," Maya explains calmly. Velocity Logistics is the third largest freight company in North America. We have exclusive cargo contracts with Pinnacle Airlines worth approximately $240 million annually. The number lands in the cabin like a bombshell. $240 million represents more revenue than most airlines generate from entire routes. If Maya is telling the truth, she's not just a passenger, she's a business partner whose decisions directly affect Pinnacle's financial health. Marcus stares at the phone screen, seeing email headers that suggest corporate relationships he never imagined. His worldview begins to crack as reality intrudes on his assumptions about who Maya Thompson actually is. Patricia Whitman leans forward to look at the business card, her expression shifting from smug satisfaction to confused uncertainty. She had assumed Maya was someone trying to gain access to privileges she hadn't earned, but the evidence suggests exactly the opposite. Velocity Logistics. Patricia says, recognition dawning in her voice. "I've heard of that company. They handle shipping for half the Fortune 500. Elena's live stream chat explodes with viewers researching Maya Thompson and Velocity Logistics in real time. Comments flood in with links to business articles, Forbes profiles, and news stories about Maya's rise from regional courier service owner to logistics empire CEO. Sophia Martinez pulls out her own phone and quickly searches for Maya Thompson CEO. The results confirm everything Maya has claimed: business awards, industry recognition, board appointments, and a net worth that places her among the youngest self-made billionaires in America. Marcus Sophia calls out, her voice carrying new authority. This passenger is exactly who she says she is. Maya Thompson is one of the most successful logistics executives in the country. Rivera has seen enough. The confrontation has moved beyond simple misunderstanding into potential civil rights violation, and as captain, he has both the authority and responsibility to intervene before the situation causes irreparable damage to passengers and airline alike. Rivera steps out of the galley and approaches the first-class section with the measured stride of someone accustomed to command authority. His presence immediately shifts the cabin dynamics. Pilots carry different weight than flight attendants in airline hierarchy, and captain's authority supersedes all other crew members. "Good evening," Rivera announces, his voice carrying clearly through the cabin. "I'm Captain Rivera, and I'll be flying this aircraft to London tonight." He addresses the security officers first, establishing his jurisdiction over the situation. "Officers, I understand there's been a concern about passenger documentation. As captain, I have ultimate responsibility for all passenger-related decisions on this aircraft. Could you brief me on the current situation?" Officer Rodriguez welcomes the captain's intervention, recognizing that pilot oversight usually leads to more rational resolution of airline disputes. "Captain, we were called to verify a passenger's documentation, but everything appears to be legitimate," Officer Rodriguez reports. "The passenger has valid ID, proper boarding pass, and what appears to be authentic business credentials indicating she's a corporate executive." Rivera nods, then turns to Marcus with the kind of direct gaze that demands honest answers. "Mr. Hamilton, could you explain the specific policy concern that initiated this verification process?" Marcus realizes he's facing someone who can't be deflected with vague references to regulations or security procedures. Captains know airline policies intimately understand federal requirements precisely, and have access to information devices that reveal truth immediately. Captain, this passenger's appearance and behavior raised concerns about premium cabin eligibility, Marcus says, trying to frame his actions as legitimate policy enforcement. I was following standard verification procedures for questionable documentation. What specific behavior concerned you? Rivera asks, his tone suggesting he already suspects the answer. Marcus struggles to articulate a response that doesn't reveal the bias underlying his actions. Maya has been sitting quietly, speaking only when addressed, complying with all reasonable requests. Her behavior has been exemplary throughout the confrontation. Well, Captain, she was. Unresponsive to initial requests for documentation, and her appearance didn't match typical first-class passenger profiles. The phrase passenger profiles hangs in the air like an admission of guilt. Rivera recognizes the coded language that airlines use to avoid directly acknowledging discriminatory practices. Mr. Hamilton Rivera says, his voice taking on the stern edge of military authority. Could you clarify what you mean by passenger profiles? Because Pinnacle Airlines doesn't maintain appearance-based criteria for cabin access. Marcus realizes he's been trapped into revealing the real motivation for his actions. There is no official passenger profile that would justify questioning Maya's documentation. His concerns were based entirely on personal assumptions about how first-class passengers should look. Rivera turns to Maya, recognizing that she's been remarkably patient throughout an encounter that should never have occurred. Ms. Thompson, I apologize for this disruption to your travel experience. Could you show me your boarding documentation so I can resolve this matter definitively? Maya hands Rivera her phone displaying the digital boarding pass. Rivera examines it briefly, then pulls out his own device to access the passenger manifest directly. Rivera's tablet connects to Pinnacle's passenger database, displaying Flight 847's complete manifest with passenger details, booking information, and account status indicators. He scrolls to Seat 1A and finds an entry that makes his blood pressure rise. Thompson Maya, Priority 1, status, corporate account, frequent flyer miles, 847,000. Annual spend, $187,000. Account notes. VIP passenger, Velocity Logistics, CEO. Handle with exceptional care. Direct corporate partnerships, see Executive Liaison Protocols. The manifest entry reveals not just that Maya is a legitimate passenger, but that she's among Pinnacle's most valuable individual customers. The VIP passenger designation means she should receive enhanced service, expedited processing, and immediate escalation of any concerns to management level. Rivera looks up from his tablet with an expression that makes Marcus step backward involuntarily. Mr. Hamilton Rivera says, his voice carrying the kind of controlled anger that's more frightening than shouting. Ms. Thompson is a Priority 1 passenger with VIP status and direct corporate partnerships with this airline. According to her account notes, she should be receiving our highest level of service, not security interrogation. Marcus feels the blood drain from his face as he realizes the magnitude of his error. He challenged not just any passenger, but one of Pinnacle's most important customers, someone whose business relationship with the airline extends far beyond individual flight purchases. Captain, the process didn't show. Marcus stumbles, trying to craft an explanation that might preserve some shred of his professional credibility. The process shows exactly what it should show. Rivera interrupts. Ms. Thompson's status was clearly indicated in our manifest. The question is why you didn't check it before initiating this confrontation. Patricia Whitman realizes that her support for Marcus has placed her on the wrong side of corporate hierarchy. If Maya Thompson is actually a VIP passenger with business partnerships, Patricia's comments about appropriateness and standards could have serious consequences for her own travel privileges. Officer Thompson addresses his partner in a low voice. This looks like a discrimination complaint waiting to happen. We should document everything carefully. Elena's live stream audience has grown to over 5,000 viewers as news of the confrontation spreads across social media platforms. The chat fills with comments from people sharing the stream, demanding accountability and praising Maya's dignified handling of obvious bias. Rivera makes a decision that will define his career and Maya's future relationship with Pinnacle Airlines. Ms. Thompson Rivera says formally on behalf of Pinnacle Airlines, "I apologize for the completely inappropriate treatment you've received. This situation should never have occurred, and I will personally ensure that appropriate corrective action is taken." He turns to Marcus with the finality of a judge delivering a verdict. "Mr. Hamilton, you're relieved of duty effective immediately. Please gather your belongings and report to the gate agent for escort off this aircraft." Marcus Hamilton stares at Captain Rivera with the expression of someone whose reality has just shattered completely. In 18 years of airline service, he's never been relieved of duty mid-flight, never faced immediate termination for passenger interaction decisions. "Captain, you can't be serious," Marcus says, his voice rising with desperation. "I was following security protocols. I was protecting the cabin environment that our premium passengers expect." Rivera's expression doesn't soften. As a captain, he's terminated crew members before, but usually for safety violations or policy breaches that affect flight operations. This situation is different. It involves civil rights, corporate relationships, and potential legal liability that extends far beyond operational concerns. "Mr. Hamilton, you questioned a Priority 1 passenger's right to occupy her paid seat based on her appearance." Rivera states clearly, ensuring everyone in the cabin hears the official characterization of Marcus's actions. "You failed to check the passenger manifest that would have immediately confirmed her status. You called security to remove a legitimate passenger because you made assumptions about who deserves premium service. Each accusation lands like a physical blow." Marcus realizes that his career isn't just ending, it's being dismantled publicly in front of passengers who will remember and share this story. But Captain Marcus protests she didn't look like she belonged in first class. "I've been doing this job for 18 years. I know when something doesn't seem right." The phrase "didn't look like she belonged" echoes through the cabin like a confession. Marcus has just articulated the bias that everyone suspected but hoped wasn't true. He judged Maya based on appearance rather than documentation. Patricia Whitman recognizes that her association with Marcus's position has become toxic. As someone who frequently flies premium cabins, she can't afford to be banned from airlines for discriminatory behavior. Captain Patricia says her voice taking on a conciliatory tone completely different from her earlier aggressive stance. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. I was simply concerned about seating assignments, not about any individual passenger's qualifications." Rivera turns toward Patricia with the kind of look that suggests he's not interested in diplomatic backtracking. "Mrs. Whitman, I heard your earlier comments about people like that and certain standards. Those remarks constitute discriminatory language that Pinnacle Airlines doesn't tolerate from passengers, any more than we tolerate it from crew members." Patricia's face flushes red as she realizes her words have been documented and witnessed by multiple passengers, security officers, and the captain himself. Elena continues streaming the confrontation, her audience now approaching 6,000 viewers as major social media accounts begin resharing the story. Comments flood in from civil rights advocates, airline employees, and travelers sharing similar experiences. Sophia Martinez stands up from her seat, recognizing that this moment requires witness testimony from credible observers. Captain Rivera Sophia says, her medical professional voice carrying authority as a physician, "I want to state for the record that Ms. Thompson exhibited no behavior that would justify security intervention. She was calm, cooperative, and professional throughout this entire encounter." James Parker adds his voice to Sophia's testimony. "I observed the entire interaction from seat 2A. The passenger in question complied with all reasonable requests and provided proper documentation when asked." The confrontation appeared to be based on appearance-based assumptions rather than legitimate security concerns. Rivera nods, appreciating the passenger testimony that supports his assessment of the situation. Mr. Hamilton Rivera says, returning his attention to Marcus, you have 5 minutes to collect your personal belongings and exit this aircraft. Security will escort you to the gate where you'll be met by Pinnacle Management for immediate suspension pending investigation. Marcus looks around the cabin, desperately hoping for support from passengers who might validate his position. But the first-class section has turned against him completely. Even Charles Brennan, who initially supported the verification process, now recognizes the discriminatory nature of Marcus's actions. "This is insane," Marcus says, his voice cracking with emotion. "I was protecting the integrity of premium service. I was maintaining standards that our high-value passengers expect." Maya Thompson speaks for the first time since Captain Rivera's arrival, her voice cutting through Marcus's protests with quiet authority. "Mr. Hamilton," Maya says, rising from her seat to face him directly, "you weren't protecting standards. You were enforcing bias. There's a difference between policy and prejudice, and what happened here was definitely the latter." She pauses, letting her words settle before delivering her final assessment. "In my business, we call this a teachable moment. The lesson is simple. Never judge someone's worth by their appearance, because you never know who you're actually dealing with." Marcus stares at Maya with the expression of someone finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. He's not just lost his job. He's become the face of airline discrimination, the example of what happens when bias masquerades as professionalism. Officer Rodriguez steps forward to facilitate Marcus's departure. "Sir, please gather your belongings. We need to clear this aircraft so it can proceed to departure." As Marcus collects his personal items from the galley passengers throughout the first-class cabin watch in complete silence. The atmosphere has shifted from luxury travel to civil rights education, with everyone understanding they've witnessed something that will be remembered and discussed long after landing. Lisa Santos, the junior flight attendant, emerges from the galley to address Captain Rivera. "Captain, I can serve as lead cabin crew for the remainder of the flight," Lisa offers. "I'm fully qualified and familiar with our premium service protocols." Rivera nods approvingly. "Thank you, Lisa. Please ensure Ms. Thompson receives our highest level of service for the remainder of her journey." Patricia Whitman remains seated but conspicuously quiet, recognizing that any further comments could result in her own removal from the aircraft. Maya settles back into her seat, pulling her hoodie up and retrieving her noise-canceling headphones. The confrontation is over, but its consequences are just beginning to unfold. 12 years earlier, Maya Thompson stood in the rain outside Chez Laurent, an upscale restaurant in Atlanta's Buckhead district. She was 24 years old, exhausted from a grueling job interview process with a venture capital firm, and desperately hungry after 8 hours of presentations and meetings that determined her company's financial future. Maya wore the best outfit she could afford, a black blazer purchased from a discount store, dress pants that were slightly too long, and shoes that pinched her feet but looked professional from a distance. She had $47 in her checking account and a business plan that she believed could revolutionize regional freight logistics. The maitre d' at Chez Laurent took one look at Maya and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "I'm sorry," he said, not sounding sorry at all, "but we're fully booked this evening. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the Applebee's down the street." Maya pulled out her reservation confirmation printed on cheap paper from the business center at the budget hotel where she was staying. "I have a reservation," Maya said quietly. "Thompson party of 1, 8:30 p.m. The maitre d' examined the paper with the expression of someone handling evidence of fraud. "This appears to be a mistake," he said, handing the confirmation back to Maya. "Our clientele expects a certain ambiance. I don't think you'd enjoy the dining experience here." The phrase hung in the humid Atlanta air like an accusation. Our clientele expects a certain ambiance. Maya understood perfectly. She wasn't being refused service because of overbooking or processing errors. She was being refused because she didn't look like she belonged in an expensive restaurant. "What exactly do you mean by ambiance?" Maya asked, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. The maitre d' gestured vaguely at her appearance, at the slightly worn blazer and the discount store accessories that marked her as someone without money. "Ma'am, this is a fine dining establishment. Our guests invest significantly in their appearance and expect to dine alongside others who appreciate similar standards." Maya looked through the restaurant's windows at the predominantly white diners in expensive clothes, the kind of people who never had to prove they deserved service, who took luxury for granted because it had always been available to them. She could have argued. She could have demanded to speak to a manager. She could have pointed out that her money was as valid as anyone else's, that discrimination based on appearance was both illegal and morally wrong. Instead, Maya made a different choice. She thanked the maitre d' for his honesty, walked back to her car, and spent the night in the hotel business center drafting a plan that would ensure no one could ever make her feel powerless again. That night, Maya outlined the strategy that would transform her small courier service into Velocity Logistics, one of the largest freight companies in North America. She worked until dawn, fueled by humiliation transformed into determination, creating a business model that would make her wealthy enough that restaurants like Chez Laurent would compete for her patronage. The venture capital meeting the next day secured $2.3 million in seed funding. Within 3 years, Maya had expanded from regional deliveries to international shipping contracts. Within 7 years, she had acquired competitors and launched operations across 4 continents. Within 10 years, she was the youngest woman to build a logistics empire worth over $1 billion. Maya never returned to Chez Laurent. She didn't need to prove anything to the maitre d', who had judged her by her appearance. But she never forgot the lesson in a world that equates appearance with worth. The only protection against discrimination is power, the kind of power that forces people to see beyond their biases. Today, sitting in seat 1A on Flight 847, Maya represents everything that maitre d' assumed she could never become. She owns restaurants more expensive than Chez Laurent. She flies first-class weekly stays in presidential suites and signs contracts worth more than most companies' annual revenue. But Maya still remembers being 24 years old and hungry, standing in the rain because someone decided she didn't deserve service. That memory drives her response to Marcus Hamilton's discrimination not with anger or revenge, but with the quiet power that comes from turning humiliation into success. Marcus Hamilton's discriminatory behavior didn't emerge suddenly on Flight 847. It developed gradually, reinforced by a process that allowed bias to masquerade as professional judgment, and enabled by management that prioritized customer complaints over employee accountability. 3 years earlier, Marcus removed a young Latino man from first class because the passenger was wearing basketball shorts and a tank top. Marcus justified the action by citing Pinnacle's dress code policy, which requires passengers to be appropriately attired for premium cabin service. The policy language was vague enough to allow subjective interpretation, and Marcus interpreted it strictly when passengers didn't match his expectations about first-class demographics. He never questioned white passengers wearing casual clothes, but consistently found dress code violations when passengers of color occupied premium seats. 2 years ago, Marcus delayed departure for 30 minutes while demanding additional verification from an elderly black woman who had purchased a last-minute first-class upgrade. He claimed her credit card looked suspicious and insisted on calling the bank to confirm the transaction. The woman, a retired professor traveling to her granddaughter's graduation, was humiliated by the public questioning of her creditworthiness. She filed a complaint with Pinnacle's customer service, but Marcus's supervisor characterized the incident as appropriate caution regarding fraudulent transactions. The complaints accumulated in Marcus's personnel file, questioning documentation from passengers of color, demanding additional verification for legitimate tickets, making assumptions about who belonged in premium cabins. But Pinnacle's management consistently supported Marcus's actions, viewing them as careful attention to service standards rather than discriminatory enforcement. Marcus learned that his biases were not just tolerated but rewarded. Passengers who complained about his treatment were dismissed as oversensitive. Colleagues who questioned his judgment were told that Marcus was protecting the airline from fraud and maintaining cabin atmosphere that justified premium pricing. The process enabled Marcus's behavior by providing him with policies flexible enough to justify discriminatory actions and management support that interpreted customer complaints as unreasonable grievances rather than evidence of bias. Marcus never saw himself as discriminatory. He viewed his actions as professional judgment, as protecting Pinnacle's brand and maintaining standards that separated first class from economy service. In his mind, he was the guardian of an exclusive experience that passengers paid premium prices to enjoy. But Marcus's pattern revealed the truth. He consistently questioned passengers whose appearance didn't match his expectations about wealth, education, and social status. He never demanded additional verification from white passengers, never doubted the creditworthiness of people who looked like him, never wondered if passengers in expensive clothes truly belonged in first class. The confrontation with Maya Thompson represents the culmination of years of unchecked bias, the moment when Marcus's discriminatory pattern finally encountered someone with the power and platform to expose it publicly. The relationship between Velocity Logistics and Pinnacle Airlines extends far beyond Maya's individual travel preferences. It represents a business partnership worth hundreds of millions of dollars annually, the kind of corporate connection that influences airline policies, route planning, and executive decision-making. 5 years ago, Pinnacle Airlines was struggling with freight revenue, losing cargo contracts to competitors who offered more reliable service and better pricing. The airline's cargo division was operating at a loss, threatening to drag down overall profitability and potentially forcing route cancellations. Maya Thompson approached Pinnacle's executives with a proposal that would revolutionize their freight operations. Exclusive cargo contracts worth $240 million annually in exchange for guaranteed capacity, priority handling, and integration with Velocity's global logistics network. The partnership transformed Pinnacle's financial position. Velocity's shipping volume filled cargo holds that had been flying partially empty, generating revenue that subsidized passenger operations and enabled route expansion. The steady cash flow from freight contracts provided stability during economic downturns and allowed Pinnacle to compete more aggressively with larger airlines. Maya's personal travel represented just a fraction of her relationship with Pinnacle, but it served as a visible symbol of the broader partnership. Her priority, one's status, reflected not just individual flight purchases, but her role as a key business ally whose satisfaction directly affected corporate revenue. The integration between Velocity and Pinnacle extended beyond simple shipping arrangements. The companies shared cargo facilities, coordinated scheduling to optimize freight capacity, and collaborated on international route planning that served both passenger and cargo demand. Maya personally influenced decisions about aircraft purchases, route expansions, and service improvements that affected thousands of Pinnacle employees and millions of passengers. Her recommendations carried weight with airline executives because her business success validated her operational expertise. When Marcus Hamilton questioned Maya's right to occupy Seat 1A, he wasn't just discriminating against an individual passenger. He was insulting a business partner whose decisions affected Pinnacle's financial health, whose contracts employed hundreds of airline workers, whose strategic input shaped the company's future. The corporate stakes of this discrimination incident extend far beyond individual hurt feelings or civil rights violations. Maya's response to her treatment could influence contract renewals, recommend alternative airline partners to other logistics companies, or simply demonstrate that Pinnacle doesn't deserve the business relationships that keep it profitable. The confrontation on Flight 847 represents multiple layers of consequences that extend far beyond the immediate passenger conflict. For Maya, the incident tests whether her success provides protection against the same discrimination she experienced as a struggling entrepreneur. Maya's response to Marcus's bias will influence how other business leaders perceive Pinnacle Airlines' corporate culture. If a company treats its most valuable business partners with discrimination, what does that suggest about its treatment of employees, smaller customers, and community stakeholders? For Marcus, the stakes involve more than just employment termination. His actions have been documented on social media, witnessed by multiple passengers, and recorded in airline reports that could affect his ability to work in the aviation industry anywhere. The incident challenges Pinnacle Airlines' corporate reputation at a time when social media amplifies discrimination stories across global platforms. Elena's live stream has demonstrated how quickly airline bias incidents can reach massive audiences and generate public relations crises. For the airline industry broadly, Maya's treatment represents a test case for how companies respond to discrimination allegations. Airlines have faced increasing scrutiny for passenger bias, and this incident provides another data point about whether the industry is serious about diversity and inclusion. The stakes also include legal implications that extend beyond individual lawsuits. Federal regulations prohibit discrimination in public transportation, and airline bias incidents can trigger regulatory investigations, policy changes, and congressional oversight that affects the entire industry. For Maya personally, this incident represents a choice between quiet acceptance and public accountability. Her wealth and status provide her with options unavailable to most discrimination victims. She can influence corporate policies, demand executive attention, and use her platform to create change. The decision Maya makes about how to respond will define not just her relationship with Pinnacle Airlines, but her role as a leader who either tolerates bias or demands better treatment for everyone who follows in her footsteps. Captain Daniel Rivera steps into the aircraft's communications center, a small alcove behind the cockpit equipped with secure satellite phones and direct lines to Pinnacle Airlines' corporate headquarters. The urgency of the situation demands immediate executive involvement, and Rivera has the authority to escalate passenger incidents directly to senior management. Rivera dials the emergency operations number that connects him to Pinnacle's crisis management team, a group of executives who handle situations that could affect the airline's reputation, legal liability, or regulatory compliance. This is Captain Rivera, Flight 847 JFK to London. Rivera says when the line connects, "I have an immediate passenger incident requiring executive review." The voice on the other end belongs to Margaret Foster Pinnacle's Vice President of Operations, a woman who has managed airline crises for 15 years and knows that captain-initiated emergency calls usually involve serious problems. Captain Rivera: "This is Margaret Foster. What's the nature of your passenger incident, ma'am? I have a Priority 1 passenger who was subjected to discriminatory treatment by cabin crew." Rivera explains his military precision evident in every word. The passenger is Maya Thompson, CEO of Velocity Logistics, our cargo partner. She was questioned, threatened with removal, and had security called because a flight attendant assumed she didn't belong in first class. The silence on the line stretches for several seconds as Foster processes the implications. Velocity Logistics represents one of Pinnacle's most important business relationships, and Maya Thompson personally signs contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars annually. "Captain, please tell me this is a misunderstanding," Foster says, but her tone suggests she already knows the truth. "Ma'am, I wish it were," Rivera continues. "I've reviewed the passenger manifest, observed the confrontation, and interviewed witnesses. This is a clear case of appearance-based discrimination against one of our most valuable customers." Foster immediately patches in Jonathan Torres, Pinnacle's CEO, who answers from his corporate jet somewhere over the Atlantic. Torres has built his career on strategic partnerships and corporate relationships, and the thought of losing Velocity's business due to employee discrimination makes his stomach turn. "Daniel, this is Jonathan Torres." The CEO's voice crackles through the satellite connection. Margaret briefed me on the situation. "How serious is this?" Rivera looks through the cockpit door toward the first-class cabin where Maya sits quietly reviewing documents on her laptop while Marcus collects his belongings under security escort. Sir, it's serious enough that I've relieved the senior flight attendant of duty and had him removed from the aircraft, Rivera reports. Multiple passengers witnessed discriminatory language and behavior. The incident was live-streamed on social media to thousands of viewers. Torres closes his eyes, recognizing the perfect storm of corporate crisis discrimination against a major business partner documented on social media with potential legal and regulatory implications. Daniel, I need you to put me through to Ms. Thompson directly, Torres says. I'll handle this personally. Rivera returns to the first-class cabin and approaches Maya's seat with the kind of deference typically reserved for heads of state. Ms. Thompson. I have Jonathan Torres, Pinnacle's CEO, on the line, Rivera announces. He'd like to speak with you directly about this incident. Maya looks up from her laptop, her expression unreadable. She's dealt with corporate executives before, knows the difference between genuine accountability and damage control motivated by financial concerns. Captain Rivera, could you put the call on speaker? Maya requests. I believe the passengers who witnessed this incident should hear the company's response. Rivera activates the phone's speaker function, and Torres's voice fills the first-class cabin with surprising clarity. Ms. Thompson, this is Jonathan Torres, CEO of Pinnacle Airlines. Torres begins his voice carrying the gravity of someone who understands the stakes. I'm calling to personally apologize for the completely unacceptable treatment you received from our crew member. What happened to you represents a failure of our training, our oversight, and our values. Maya leans back in her seat, appreciating the directness, but waiting to hear substance beyond apologies. Mr. Torres, I appreciate your call, Maya responds. But I'm more interested in your company's plan to prevent this from happening to other passengers who don't have corporate partnerships to protect them. The question cuts directly to the heart of the issue. Maya isn't just seeking personal compensation or individual accountability, she's demanding structural changes that address bias in airline operations. Ms. Thompson, you're absolutely right, Torres acknowledges. This incident has exposed weaknesses in our crew training and passenger service protocols that we need to address comprehensively. Patricia Whitman shifts uncomfortably in seat 1B, realizing that her discriminatory comments are part of a conversation now involving airline executives and potentially affecting company policies. Elena continues streaming the CEO's call to her nearly 7,000 viewers, many of whom are corporate executives, civil rights advocates, and transportation industry professionals who understand the significance of real-time corporate accountability. Torres activates Pinnacle's crisis management protocol from his corporate jet, initiating a coordinated response that involves legal counsel, public relations specialists, human resources directors, and operational executives across multiple time zones. Margaret, I need you to immediately suspend the flight attendant involved and initiate a full investigation into our crew training protocols. Torres instructs his operations VP. I want every incident report involving passenger discrimination reviewed and analyzed for patterns. Foster takes notes while simultaneously sending text messages to department heads. Code red discrimination incident. CEO-level involvement required. All hands on deck. Jonathan Maya's voice comes through the speaker, clearly. Suspension pending investigation sounds like standard corporate language for hoping this disappears quietly. I need to hear specific commitments about policy changes. Torres recognizes that Maya understands corporate response strategies and won't be satisfied with vague promises about reviews and improvements. Ms. Thompson, you're right to demand specifics. Torres acknowledges. I'm committing to implementing mandatory bias training for all customer-facing employees within 60 days. I'm also establishing an independent passenger rights advocate position with authority to investigate discrimination complaints. Maya considers the proposals recognizing genuine policy changes, but understanding that implementation details determine whether corporate commitments become real reform. Mr. Torres. Those are positive steps, Maya says. But I also want to discuss Pinnacle's relationship with passenger advocates and civil rights organizations. Change requires external oversight, not just internal promises. Torres realizes that Maya is negotiating not just personal resolution, but industry-wide reform. Her demands extend beyond individual compensation to address problems that affect thousands of passengers annually. I'm open to establishing partnerships with civil rights organizations. Torres agrees. We could create a passenger equity council with external representatives who review policies and investigate complaints independently. Elena's live stream chat fills with comments from viewers who recognize the significance of real-time policy negotiation between a discrimination victim and airline executives. The conversation represents unprecedented accountability and transparency in corporate bias response. Sofia Martinez, still taking notes on the entire incident, recognizes that she's witnessing history. A discrimination victim with sufficient power to demand immediate corporate change rather than waiting for lawsuits or regulatory intervention. Maya Thompson sets down her phone and addresses the first-class cabin directly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who has negotiated billion-dollar deals and understands the psychology of power dynamics. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed today represents something larger than individual discrimination, Maya announces. It reflects institutional biases that affect millions of travelers who don't have corporate partnerships to protect them. She stands up from her seat, commanding attention from passengers, security officers, and Captain Rivera, with the presence that made her successful in boardrooms around the world. I want to be clear about something, Maya continues. I'm not seeking personal compensation or individual apologies. I'm demanding changes that protect every passenger from the treatment I received today. Maya opens her laptop and begins typing, her fingers moving with the precision of someone drafting legal documents or contract amendments. Mr. Torres. Maya says, addressing the CEO through the speakerphone. I'm sending you a draft memorandum of understanding that outlines specific policy changes I believe Pinnacle Airlines should implement. Torres, listening from his corporate jet with a team of lawyers and executives, recognizes that Maya is treating this incident as a business negotiation rather than a personal grievance. Ms. Thompson. I'm prepared to review your proposals, Torres responds. But I hope you'll consider maintaining our cargo partnership while we work through these issues. Maya smiles for the first time since the confrontation began, recognizing the vulnerability in Torres's voice. He's more concerned about losing $240 million in annual cargo revenue than he is about addressing discrimination, and Maya intends to use that leverage strategically. Mr. Torres, our cargo partnership depends entirely on whether Pinnacle demonstrates genuine commitment to treating all passengers with dignity, Maya states clearly. I won't do business with companies that tolerate bias regardless of how profitable our relationship might be. The threat hangs in the air like a sword over Pinnacle's financial future. Velocity Logistics could easily shift its shipping volume to competing airlines, and Maya's reputation in the logistics industry could influence other cargo companies to follow her lead. I understand completely, Torres says, his voice carrying new urgency. What specific commitments do you need to see from Pinnacle? Maya begins reading from her laptop screen, outlining demands that extend far beyond typical corporate discrimination settlements. First, mandatory bias training for all customer-facing employees, conducted by independent civil rights organizations, rather than internal HR departments. Second, establishment of a passenger equity council with external oversight authority and budget independence from airline operations. Third, public reporting of discrimination complaint statistics, investigation outcomes, and corrective actions taken. Fourth, partnership with civil rights organizations to develop industry-wide standards for equitable passenger treatment. Each demand represents a fundamental change in how airlines handle discrimination complaints, moving from reactive damage control to proactive bias prevention. Torres consults with his legal team before responding, recognizing that Maya's demands could transform industry practices if other airlines adopt similar policies. Ms. Thompson, those are significant commitments, Torres acknowledges. I'll need board approval for some of them, but I'm prepared to support your proposals. Maya nods, understanding that genuine change requires more than CEO promises. It requires institutional commitment that survives executive turnover and financial pressures. Mr. Torres, I'm also requesting that Pinnacle Airlines establish a discrimination incident response fund. Maya adds, when bias occurs, affected passengers should receive immediate compensation without having to file lawsuits or navigate bureaucratic appeals processes. The proposal represents a revolutionary approach to discrimination response, accepting financial responsibility for bias incidents, rather than fighting every complaint through legal channels. I'll discuss the response fund proposal with our board. Torres agrees. Is there anything else you need to see from Pinnacle? Maya looks around the first-class cabin, seeing passengers who have witnessed her transformation from discrimination victim to corporate reformer. Mr. Torres, I want Marcus Hamilton to receive bias training and counseling rather than simple termination. Maya says, surprising everyone in the cabin. Change requires education, not just punishment. The request demonstrates Maya's understanding that lasting reform requires converting bias perpetrators rather than simply removing them from the airline industry. While Maya negotiates with Pinnacle's CEO, the consequences of the discrimination incident begin cascading through corporate hierarchies and social media networks with unprecedented speed. Margaret Foster, still connected to the conference call, coordinates immediate damage control from Pinnacle's New York headquarters. She sends emergency alerts to department heads across the company. Priority 1 discrimination incident. Media response required. Legal review initiated. Pinnacle's public relations team monitors Elena's Instagram live stream and recognizes that the story has already spread beyond social media to mainstream news outlets. CNN, NBC, and the Associated Press have picked up reports about airline discrimination caught on live stream, and the story is trending on Twitter with hashtags like Pinnacle, Airlines Bias, and Maya Thompson Strong. The airline's stock price begins fluctuating as trading algorithms detect negative sentiment and discrimination-related keywords in news feeds and social media posts. Investors who follow airline industry trends recognize that discrimination scandals can affect customer loyalty, regulatory scrutiny, and corporate partnerships. Marcus Hamilton, escorted off the aircraft by security officers, finds himself suddenly unemployed with a discrimination incident in his personnel file that will make future employment in the aviation industry extremely difficult. His 18-year career has ended not due to safety violations or criminal behavior, but because he couldn't see beyond his assumptions about who deserves luxury. Patricia Whitman realizes that her discriminatory comments have been documented and broadcast to thousands of people, potentially affecting her ability to travel on Pinnacle Airlines or maintain her social standing in circles where airline executives have influence. Legal analysts watching Elena's live stream recognize that Maya's real-time negotiation with Pinnacle's CEO creates precedent for handling discrimination complaints through immediate corporate accountability rather than lengthy legal proceedings. Civil rights organizations begin reaching out to Maya's company, offering support for her reform demands and requesting partnership in developing industry-wide anti-bias standards. Other airlines monitor the incident closely, recognizing that Maya's demands could become industry benchmarks if Pinnacle agrees to implement them. Delta United and American Airlines executives begin reviewing their own discrimination response procedures and bias training protocols. Captain Rivera, watching Maya negotiate corporate policy changes in real time, recognizes that he's witnessing something unprecedented in commercial aviation. A discrimination victim with sufficient power to demand immediate institutional reform. Ms. Thompson Rivera says during a pause in the CEO conversation, I want you to know that what you're doing here will affect pilots, flight attendants, and passengers throughout the industry. This is leadership. Maya acknowledges Rivera's comment with a nod of respect for someone who intervened when intervention required personal courage and professional risk. Captain Rivera, you demonstrated exactly the kind of moral leadership that prevents discrimination. Incidents from escalating. Maya responds, I hope Pinnacle recognizes the value of employees who prioritize passenger dignity over corporate convenience. Torres, listening through the speakerphone, realizes that Rivera's intervention probably saved Pinnacle from much worse consequences than those they're currently facing. Captain Rivera, you showed exceptional judgment and integrity, Torres acknowledges. I'll be recommending you for immediate promotion to chief pilot position. The promotion announcement draws applause from first-class passengers who witnessed Rivera's courage in challenging Marcus's discriminatory behavior and supporting Maya's dignity. Elena's live-stream audience, now approaching 8,000 viewers, celebrates Rivera's promotion as evidence that moral courage gets rewarded when corporate executives face public accountability for employee behavior. Maya recognizes that her negotiation with Pinnacle's CEO has created momentum for changes that extend far beyond individual incident resolution. She's used her corporate leverage to demand reforms that could protect thousands of future passengers from experiencing the discrimination she faced today. Mr. Torres, I'm prepared to sign a memorandum of understanding based on our discussion, Maya announces. But I want the agreement to include measurable benchmarks and public reporting requirements that demonstrate genuine progress rather than cosmetic changes. Torres agrees to Maya's transparency, demands recognizing that her business partnership provides Pinnacle with credibility when implementing bias prevention programs that other airlines might dismiss as public relations theater. As Maya finalizes the agreement that transforms her discrimination experience into industry reform, passengers throughout the first-class cabin understand they've witnessed something historically significant: the real-time conversion of bias into accountability, of personal injury into structural change, of individual power into collective protection. The authority Maya wields isn't just corporate or financial. It's moral authority earned through dignity, maintained under pressure, and strategic authority derived from using personal leverage to create broader justice. The conference call between Maya Thompson and Pinnacle Airlines CEO Jonathan Torres concludes with an agreement that reverberates through corporate offices, social media networks, and airline industry boardrooms within minutes of implementation. Margaret Foster, coordinating from Pinnacle's headquarters, immediately activates the company's emergency response protocol. She sends a company-wide email marked Priority 1, Mandatory Action Required, to all department heads, regional managers, and customer service directors. Effective immediately, all passenger discrimination complaints receive executive-level review. Any employee questioning passenger documentation based on appearance faces immediate suspension pending investigation. The new policy represents the fastest corporate response to discrimination in airline industry history, driven by Maya's leverage as a business partner and the public nature of Elena's live documentation. Marcus Hamilton sits in an airport security office, officially unemployed for the first time in his adult life. His Pinnacle Airlines badge has been confiscated, his access credentials revoked, and his personnel file permanently marked with discrimination violations that will prevent employment at any major airline. Security Officer Rodriguez completes an incident report that characterizes Marcus's behavior as appearance-based passenger profiling without legitimate security justification. The official documentation creates a paper trail that civil rights attorneys could use in future discrimination cases involving airline bias. Patricia Whitman discovers that her discriminatory comments have consequences beyond public embarrassment. A Pinnacle Airlines customer service representative calls her while she's still seated in 1B, informing her that she's been placed on a review list for passengers whose behavior conflicts with company diversity policies. Mrs. Whitman, your statements about passenger appropriateness and standards have been documented and reported. The customer service agent explains. Future travel with Pinnacle Airlines will require advance approval from our passenger equity team. Patricia realizes that her wealth and frequent flyer status don't protect her from consequences when her bias is documented publicly and contradicts corporate policies. Elena Morales ends her Instagram live stream after 3 hours of documentation with a final audience of over 12,000 viewers and more than 50,000 total views. Her recording becomes evidence in Pinnacle's internal investigation and a case study for civil rights organizations training corporate executives about discrimination response. The stream's impact extends beyond immediate viewership as news outlets, legal analysts, and airline industry experts share clips and commentary across mainstream media platforms. Captain Rivera receives notification of his promotion to chief pilot while still in the cockpit, along with a new assignment leading Pinnacle's pilot diversity and inclusion training program. Captain Rivera, your intervention demonstrated the kind of moral leadership we need throughout our operation, Torres explains in a follow-up call. I want you to develop training protocols that teach all crew members to recognize and prevent passenger discrimination. Rivera's promotion sends a message throughout Pinnacle that employees who challenge bias get rewarded while those who perpetrate it face immediate consequences. Maya Thompson closes her laptop and addresses the first-class cabin with the satisfaction of someone who has successfully negotiated terms that extend far beyond personal compensation. Ladies and gentlemen, what we've accomplished here today represents more than incident resolution, Maya announces. We've created accountability structures that will protect future passengers from experiencing what I endured. She stands and looks around the cabin at passengers who witnessed her transformation from bias victim to corporate reformer. I want to thank everyone who documented this incident, offered witness testimony, and supported truth over convenience. Maya continues. Change happens when good people refuse to remain silent about injustice. Sophia Martinez approaches Maya with the business card she's been preparing since the discrimination incident began. Ms. Thompson, I'm Dr. Sophia Martinez, and I'd like to volunteer for your Passenger Equity Council, Sophia offers. As a physician, I understand the importance of preventing bias in critical decision-making situations. Maya accepts the card, recognizing that her incident has inspired professionals to contribute their expertise to broader reform efforts. James Parker also approaches, offering his business card and expertise. Ms. Thompson, I'm James Parker, a business consultant specializing in corporate diversity training. I'd like to help develop the bias prevention programs we discussed. Elena Morales shows Maya her phone displaying comments from the live stream audience that include offers of legal support, media coverage, and civil rights organization partnerships. Ms. Thompson, thousands of people watched your negotiation with Pinnacle's CEO, Elena explains. They're sharing their own discrimination stories and asking how they can support the changes you're demanding. Maya recognizes that her incident has created momentum for industry-wide reform that extends far beyond Pinnacle Airlines' policy changes. Elena, I'd like you to document the implementation of these reforms over the next 6 months, Maya requests. Your live stream proved that transparency creates accountability. We need ongoing documentation to ensure corporate promises become real changes. Maya pulls out her business card and writes her personal phone number on the back, handing it to Elena with genuine gratitude. You gave me a voice when I needed witnesses, Maya explains. Your courage in documenting this discrimination made corporate accountability possible. Charles Brennan, who initially supported Marcus's verification process, before recognizing the discriminatory nature of his actions, approaches Maya with obvious discomfort but sincere remorse. Ms. Thompson, I owe you an apology, Charles says. I initially supported the flight attendant's behavior because I didn't recognize the bias underlying his actions. Your dignity throughout this confrontation taught me to examine my own assumptions about who deserves respect. Maya accepts Charles's apology, understanding that lasting change requires converting bias enablers rather than simply confronting bias perpetrators. Mr. Brennan's recognition of bias is the first step toward preventing it. Maya responds, I hope you'll use this experience to challenge discrimination when you witness it in the future. Captain Daniel Rivera takes advantage of the departure delay to address the entire first-class cabin, using his authority as pilot to reinforce the lessons learned from Maya's discrimination incident. Ladies and gentlemen, What happened in this cabin today represents both airline failure and passenger courage, Rivera announces. As your captain, I want you to know that Pinnacle Airlines will not tolerate discrimination against any passenger, regardless of their appearance, background, or perceived status. Rivera's statement receives applause from passengers who witnessed Maya's dignified response to obvious bias and appreciate leadership that prioritizes moral courage over corporate convenience. Going forward, any Pinnacle crew member who questions passenger documentation based on appearance will face immediate removal from duty. Rivera continues, "Our job is to serve passengers safely and respectfully, not to judge whether they deserve the seats they've purchased." Maya approaches Rivera privately, recognizing that his intervention transformed what could have been a discriminatory removal into an opportunity for corporate accountability. "Captain Rivera, your decision to challenge Marcus's behavior probably saved Pinnacle from much worse consequences," Maya acknowledges. "You demonstrated exactly the kind of moral leadership that prevents discrimination from escalating into legal crises." Rivera accepts Maya's gratitude but redirects credit toward her strategic response to the discrimination incident. "Ms. Thompson, you turned personal bias into corporate reform," Rivera responds. "Most discrimination victims don't have the leverage to demand immediate policy changes. You used your influence to create protections for passengers who don't have corporate partnerships to shield them." The mutual respect between Maya and Rivera reflects a partnership between passenger advocacy and crew leadership that could model improved airline culture throughout the industry. Rivera returns to the cockpit to prepare for departure, but first makes an announcement that passengers will remember long after landing. "This is your captain speaking. Tonight's flight represents new beginning for Pinnacle Airlines. We're not just flying to London, we're flying toward a future where every passenger receives the respect and dignity they deserve." Elena Morales has become an accidental civil rights documentarian, her Instagram live stream transforming from travel content into evidence of airline discrimination and corporate accountability. Major news outlets contact Elena for interviews about her role documenting the incident. CNN, NBC News, the Associated Press, and the Washington Post want to discuss the power of social media in creating real-time accountability for corporate bias. "I was just trying to document something that felt wrong," Elena explains to a CNN reporter via phone. But Maya Thompson's response showed me that witness documentation can create immediate change when bias victims have leverage and support. Elena's stream demonstrates how social media can transform individual discrimination incidents into collective action, with viewers sharing similar experiences and demanding industry-wide reform. Sofia Martinez uses her medical professional credentials to write detailed analysis of the discrimination incident for healthcare diversity publications, highlighting parallels between airline bias and healthcare disparities that affect patient treatment. Discrimination in service industries reflects broader biases that appear in healthcare education and professional environments, Sophia writes. Maya Thompson's response created a model for converting individual bias incidents into institutional change. James Parker develops a business case study based on the incident, analyzing how corporate leverage and strategic negotiation can achieve faster discrimination resolution than traditional legal remedies. Thompson versus Pinnacle Airlines demonstrates that business relationships can create accountability mechanisms more effective than lawsuits or regulatory complaints. Parker writes in Harvard Business Review, "Corporate executives respond to revenue threats faster than they respond to civil rights advocacy." Charles Brennan reflects on his initial support for Marcus's verification process, recognizing how easily well-intentioned people can enable discrimination through passive acceptance of biased authority. "I assumed the flight attendant was following legitimate policies," Charles later writes in a LinkedIn post that goes viral. Maya Thompson's experience taught me to question whether procedures are truly neutral or whether they enable bias disguised as professionalism. 6 months after the Flight 847 incident, Pinnacle Airlines publishes its first passenger equity report, documenting discrimination, complaint, statistics, investigation outcomes, and policy improvements implemented since Maya's negotiation with CEO Jonathan Torres. The report reveals that bias training reduced passenger discrimination complaints by 73% across Pinnacle's domestic and international routes. The Independent Passenger Equity Council investigated 47 bias allegations, resulting in policy changes, additional training, or employee termination in cases where discrimination was confirmed. Maya Thompson serves as chair of the Passenger Equity Council, using her business expertise to develop accountability structures that survive corporate leadership changes and financial pressures. Other major airlines adopt similar equity reporting and bias prevention programs after recognizing that passenger discrimination creates legal liability, public relations problems, and potential loss of business partnerships. Delta Airlines establishes a Bias Incident Response Fund that provides immediate compensation to discrimination victims, without requiring lawsuits or lengthy appeals processes. United Airlines partners with the NAACP and Anti-Defamation League to develop industry-wide bias training standards. American Airlines creates a passenger advocate position with authority to investigate discrimination complaints independently from airline management, ensuring that bias investigations aren't compromised by corporate interests. The broader airline industry recognizes that Maya's incident created precedent for handling discrimination through immediate corporate accountability rather than defensive legal strategies that damage company reputation and passenger trust. Maya's strategic response to bias becomes a case study taught in business schools, civil rights organizations, and corporate diversity training programs as an example of how individual leverage can create broad change. Captain Rivera completes the pre-flight checklist and announces departure clearance over the cabin intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've been cleared for takeoff to London Heathrow. Thank you for your patience during our extended boarding process." Maya settles back into seat 1A, pulling her hoodie up and adjusting her noise-canceling headphones. The seat that became a battleground for dignity and respect now represents victory achieved through strategic negotiation rather than angry confrontation. Patricia Whitman sits quietly in 1B, chastened by consequences, and hopefully reflecting on assumptions that led her to support discrimination against a fellow passenger. She doesn't speak for the remainder of the flight, perhaps understanding that her biases could have cost Pinnacle Airlines a valuable business relationship. Elena Morales documents the takeoff on Instagram, posting a photo of the runway with text that reads, "Sometimes bearing witness to injustice becomes an opportunity to create accountability. Change happens when good people refuse to remain silent." Sophia Martinez and James Parker exchange contact information planning to collaborate on research about bias prevention in service industries. Their chance meeting during a discrimination incident has evolved into professional partnership focused on advancing equity. Charles Brennan spends the flight reading articles about unconscious bias and discrimination recognition, educating himself about dynamics he failed to recognize during the initial confrontation. Captain Rivera announces smooth sailing at 35,000 feet. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude with clear skies ahead. Sometimes turbulence on the ground leads to smoother flying at elevation. The metaphor isn't lost on passengers who understand that confronting bias, while uncomfortable, creates clearer paths forward for everyone involved. As Flight 847 crosses the Atlantic toward London, passengers carry with them the memory of witnessing discrimination, transformed into accountability bias, converted into reform, and individual courage, multiplied into collective protection." Maya Thompson, CEO of Velocity Logistics, sleeps peacefully in seat 1A, not because she's forgotten the discrimination she experienced, but because she's channeled it into changes that will protect countless future passengers from enduring similar treatment. The flight that began with assumptions about who belongs in first class ends with recognition that dignity and respect aren't determined by appearance, background, or perceived status. They're fundamental rights that courageous individuals and accountable institutions must protect for everyone. Maya Thompson stands at the podium in Pinnacle Airlines' corporate headquarters addressing the company's annual Diversity and Inclusion Conference. She wears the same gray cashmere hoodie from Flight 847, now a symbol of dignity maintained under pressure rather than grounds for discrimination. 6 months ago, your flight attendant told me I didn't belong in first class. Maya begins her voice carrying to an audience of 300 airline executives, crew members, and industry leaders. Today I'm here to report that the changes we negotiated have protected 847 passengers from experiencing similar treatment. The number isn't coincidental. Maya and Pinnacle's data analytics team tracked every bias complaint investigation outcome and policy improvement since the Flight 847 incident, using metrics to measure progress beyond corporate promises. The audience includes Marcus Hamilton, who completed court-mandated bias training and anger management counseling before being hired as a customer service representative for a regional airline. His new employer required him to write a public letter acknowledging the discrimination he perpetrated and committing to treating all passengers with dignity. I learned that my assumptions about who deserves respect were based on bias rather than policy, Marcus wrote in a letter published on Pinnacle's website. Maya Thompson's grace under pressure taught me that professionalism means serving passengers equally regardless of their appearance or perceived status. Captain Daniel Rivera, now chief pilot and director of crew equity training, introduces new bias prevention protocols that have been adopted by airlines across North America and Europe. Rivera's military precision and moral authority have made him the industry's leading voice for discrimination prevention. What happened on Flight 847 created a teachable moment that transformed our entire approach to passenger service, Rivera explains to the conference audience. We learned that preventing bias requires more than policies. It requires cultural change that starts with leadership accountability. Patricia Whitman doesn't attend the conference. She relocated to Phoenix after New York social circles ostracized her for documented discriminatory behavior. Her comments during the Flight 847 incident became a case study in how privileged passengers can enable crew bias through social pressure and coded language. Elena Morales has become a sought-after speaker about social media accountability and citizen journalism. Her documentation of Maya's discrimination incident demonstrated how digital platforms can create immediate consequences for corporate bias when traditional complaint channels fail. Live streaming discrimination creates transparency that forces accountability, Elena tells corporate diversity audiences. Companies respond differently when bias happens in public rather than behind closed doors. Marcus Hamilton works the customer service desk at Mountain View Regional Airport, a small facility serving rural Colorado communities. His salary is 1/3 of what he earned at Pinnacle, and his discrimination incident prevents advancement to supervisory positions throughout the airline industry. But Marcus has gained something he lacked during 18 years of premium cabin service perspective about the impact of bias on human dignity. His mandatory counseling included sessions with discrimination victims who helped him understand how assumptions about belonging affect people's sense of worth. I thought I was protecting standards, Marcus reflects during a filmed interview for Pinnacle's training program. But I was really protecting my own biases. Maya Thompson deserved better treatment, and every passenger deserves to be seen as an individual rather than a stereotype. Marcus's story becomes part of bias prevention training across the airline industry, demonstrating both the consequences of discrimination and the possibility of education leading to genuine attitude change. Patricia Whitman's fall from social prominence illustrates how documented bias affects wealthy individuals who assume their status protects them from accountability. Her discriminatory comments during Flight 847 were screenshots shared across social media platforms and ultimately cost her memberships in exclusive clubs and charitable organizations. The social ostracism Patricia experienced reflects changing attitudes about acceptable behavior in public spaces. Wealthy passengers can no longer express bias with impunity when their comments are documented and shared by witnesses with global platforms. Patricia's experience becomes a cautionary tale taught in corporate training programs. Privilege doesn't shield anyone from consequences when discrimination is documented and shared publicly. Maya Thompson's response to airline discrimination has influenced policy changes that extend far beyond Pinnacle Airlines. The Passenger Equity Council model has been adopted by transportation companies, hospitality businesses, and service industries that recognize bias prevention as both moral imperative and business necessity. The changes Maya negotiated have protected thousands of passengers from experiencing appearance-based discrimination. Bias incident reporting has increased 300% across participating airlines, not because discrimination has worsened, but because passengers now trust that complaints will be investigated fairly and resolved promptly. Maya's story resonates with business leaders who recognize that corporate leverage can create faster change than traditional civil rights advocacy. Her strategic use of business relationships to demand accountability has inspired other executives to condition partnerships on diversity performance and bias prevention. The broader impact extends beyond airline industry reform. Maya's response demonstrates that individuals with institutional power have responsibility to use their influence for collective protection rather than personal benefit alone. Elena's documentation of the incident continues to generate discussion about witness responsibility and social media accountability. Her decision to record discrimination and share it publicly created consequences that traditional complaint channels couldn't achieve. The story of Flight 847 has become required reading in business schools, law programs, and diversity training curricula because it demonstrates how bias incidents can become catalysts for positive change. When victims have leverage, allies provide support, and witnesses document truth. Maya Thompson still flies first class weekly, but now she travels with confidence that her presence won't be questioned based on assumptions about who deserves luxury. More importantly, she travels knowing that her experience created protections for passengers who don't have corporate partnerships to shield them from bias. The hoodie Maya wore during the discrimination incident hangs in her office not as a trophy of personal victory, but as a reminder that dignity must be defended for everyone, not just those with power to demand accountability. Captain Rivera continues to lead bias prevention training with the understanding that airline culture changes one crew member at a time, one policy at a time, one incident at a time, when handled correctly rather than defensively. The passengers who witnessed Maya's transformation from discrimination victim to corporate reformer carry the memory of seeing individual courage create collective change. They understand that progress happens when good people refuse to remain silent about injustice, when witnesses document truth, and when individuals with power use it responsibly. Flight 847's legacy isn't just about airline bias prevention. It's about the responsibility all of us have to challenge discrimination when we witness it, support dignity when it's threatened, and use whatever influence we possess to create a world where everyone receives the respect they deserve, regardless of their appearance, background, or perceived status. Maya Thompson proved that quiet strength can be more powerful than angry confrontation, that strategic negotiation can achieve faster results than lengthy litigation, and that individual incidents can become catalysts for broad change when handled with wisdom, courage, and commitment to protecting others who might face similar treatment. The message resonates far beyond airline terminals. Never judge someone's worth by their appearance, because you never know who you're actually dealing with. More importantly, everyone deserves dignity and respect, not because of their status or power, but because of their fundamental humanity. That's the lesson of Flight 847, and it's a lesson that continues to create positive change every time someone chooses accountability over defensiveness, truth over convenience, and justice over bias. If you've witnessed bias on a flight, in a boardroom, or anywhere your presence was questioned, your story belongs here. Share it below. Because when we speak up, we build structures that don't just fly, they soar. And if this story opened your eyes to the power of standing up against discrimination, please hit that like button. Your support helps these important stories reach more people who need to hear them. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of justice and courage that prove ordinary people can create extraordinary change. Hit the notification bell so you never miss when we share these powerful moments that remind us all to treat each other with dignity and respect. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their voice matters, that witnesses can make a difference, and that change is possible when we refuse to stay silent. Together, we can build a world where everyone gets the respect they deserve.